Ladies, Fish, and Gentlemen by Michael Morgan. 1. Anna's Journal, November 16, in the year of our Lord 1560. Sighted the lighthouse at Los Cristobal just before dawn today. Pedro came and woke me up from a dead sleep. The volcano is beautiful and terrifying as it threw a fountain of sparks and steam into the sky. Captain Gutierrez told me that the rising tide fills holes in the island and the steam erupts at the sewer level, meets the lava in the caldera. Ships use the fountain at night or the plume during the day to find the harbor. The reek of the ship had faded from notice during the crossing. The horror of the harbor's stench drove the ship's reek headlong and left it cowering in the deepest recesses of memory. The fine perfume on the handkerchief held firmly to the nose of the young woman made the ultimate sacrifice in the face of the stew of rotted fish, sewage, and thousands of unwashed bodies that hovered over the water despite the morning's onshore breeze. Just like the smell of Cadiz the day we left. The view before Anna was gray rows of weathered wooden warehouses divided into 5 sections by broad avenues packed with wheeled transport and pedestrians, each going their own way, heedless of the others. Only the lighthouse makes this place different from home. Her gaze ranged beyond the docks to the terrace, arching north and south. The uneven rooftops creating jagged stairs leading up to the pennants floating above the great walled city crowning the escarpment. The buildings piled against one another along each terrace were glimpses of the peoples that occupied them. Iberian, Caledonian, Britannic. Anna counted off the nations that she could recognize. They came to the new world and brought the old one with them. Pedro stepped to the rail beside Anna. "It'll take time to finish the docking. You should wait in your cabin." Anna turned to look at her brother. He was dressed to the height of Madrid fashion, wearing a maroon doublet with the embroidered designs picked out in the gold thread. Slashed gold plantoons flared around his hips. The golden fabric of the plantoons was tamed by the deep burgundy velvet insets matching his doublet. The baldric supporting his rapier was polished black leather with a golden buckle. She reached up and adjusted the small brooch that secured his high lace-trimmed collar to his throat. Quite the handsome young Don, she thought. My cabin smells of chamber pots even when there are none about. I will wait here, Anna insisted. Pedro sighed. You will be in the way of the men. Come, let us go have a game of backgammon to pass time. He extended his elbow and Anna relented to take his arm and be escorted below deck. 6-3. The token clicked on the board as Pedro counted off his move. Anna tried not to grit her teeth at her brother's need to tap his pieces on the board. It was his habit for as long as she could remember, and it always annoyed her. Your turn. Instead of dice, Anna reached for her tea. How do you feel about this marriage? What is there to feel about it? Pedro nodded at the board. We still playing? Anna set down her cup of untouched tea and rolled the dice. 2-5. She silently moved her pieces and placed one of Pedro's pieces on the bar. You're being traded to the Langus for a political allegiance. Does that not worry you? Pedro seized the dice and shook them vigorously. More like El Marquis de Langus is trading a daughter for an alliance with House Lizama and... The dice tumbled in mocking sedation after Pedro's gambler's theatrics. Once my patrimony is recognized, it'll be a good match for both of us. He threw up his hands in frustration. Merda, I am stuck. Anna took the dice. I agree. An alliance with another governor's house would be a great victory for Abuelo, but I still miss Papi, and I do not understand why Abuelo summoned both of us. The dice rolled and Anna moved. Another of Pedro's tokens joined the first on the bar. Pedro grimaced as he took the dice. I assume another of the governors has an unmarried son or two. Sophia's knock sounded on the cabin door. At the voice from within, Sophia opened the door and entered the tiny room. Pausing to drop a faint curtsy, she announced, The bosun sends his compliments, Signor y Signorita. Passengers are now permitted to disembark at their convenience. Pedro slid his chair away from the small table in their game and offered a hand to help his sister rise. Have our things been packed, Sophia? Anna asked. Yes, mistress. Everything is prepared. Sophia was an excellent servant, intelligent and quite clever in her way. Anna enjoyed her company and envied her singing voice. Very good. Have the trunks loaded, Anna began. No need to keep grandfather waiting, Pedro interrupted as he settled his baldric supporting his rapier across the shoulders and slid the matching dagger through his belt. The chests can be delivered later, he turned to Sophia. Find Ronaldo and tell him to hire a coach. Then he is to wait to oversee the unloading of our possessions and transport to my grandfather's house. Si, Don Pedro. A curtsy, and Sophia left the cabin. Following Pedro to the main deck, Anna was blasted by the chaotic industry of the docks and their stained, gray-tinged riot as cargo nets laden with boxes and barrels performed a cross between ballet and trapeze artistry. Men preparing ships to sail, competing for space with men from ships just arriving. Vendors of every sort of good, exotic or common, cried from canopied stalls or push carts ecking their way across the waterfront. Individual voices broke free of the overpowering din. An order given or acknowledged, wine for sale, a barrel or cask, fresh fruit, salt pork, copper pots. The kaleidoscope was shattered by Pedro. Ronaldo found one. Anna followed the pointed finger to see Pedro's footman standing at the end of the quay negotiating with the driver of a coach. The deal concluded, Ronaldo returned to the ship and approached Pedro, offering a slight bow. The coachman'll drive the master and mistress to their grandfather's house in the Iberian ward, sir. Thank you, Ronaldo, Pedro replied, turning to Anna. Dear sister, let us enjoy the sights of the city. Welcome to Los Cristobal. He made a flamboyant bow, sporting a comic grin that he knew would make her laugh. Why, thank you, gallant sir, said Anna, playing along with his jest by meeting his bow with her deepest curtsy. I shall be honored. Their laugh followed them down the gangplank. The sights of the city crawled past the coach's windows as the driver fought his way through the dockside bedlam. Finally, breaking through the edge of the jam, he urged the horse to trot, and a slight breeze began to trickle on his face as she tried to take in their new home all at once. Her father's journal had described the port side of the city as a vast series of concentric semicircular terraces ascending the face of the escarpment, rising from sea to the walled city of Los Cristobal. The terraces were flat pathways 2 furlongs wide when Papa arrived. The rings are the common districts. This area is called Dockside, Pedro said. The terraces form a switchback road. Pedro's arms shot out the window, pointing at something Anna could not see. Look, over there! Those massive lifts can rise a fully loaded wagon and team of 8 from one level to the next all at once. As the coach progressed, Anna saw several head of cattle shifting nervously on some kind of platform as several men struggled to calm them. Beneath the city is a vast catacomb called the Abyss. Only the poorest people live there. Pedro's narrative faded into the background of the noise as Anna stared out the window of her side of the coach. Anna's kerchief was over her nose again as the coach made the turn at the southern end of the first switchback and began ascending to Traders Road, the first level above Dockside. Tottering tenement buildings, 3 and 4 stories tall, blocked her view of the harbor from the right-hand window. The view on the left was just as squalid. Faded flowers haunted doorways and alleys, or hung from windows beckoning and calling to passing men. Skinny, pale children ran toward the coach as it slowed for the press of humanity, palms outstretched. Master, a coin, please! Mistress, just a copper, please! The coachman cracked his whip, and the horse picked up his pace. The children ran alongside, pleading for all that they were worth. Anna turned to Pedro. Give me your purse. Anna, do not encourage them, Pedro replied. They spend their lives begging from every passer-by. They are starving, and you will not spare a few coins, Anna huffed. If a few coins would change their lives, I would give them freely, Pedro said. If they are true beggars, they will starve whether I give them coins or not, but look at them closely and tell me what you see. Anna leaned out the coach window and looked at the children sullenly walking back through the crowd. I see poor starving children, she said as she leaned back in her seat. Now think about those children and tell me if I speak the truth, Pedro challenged her. The oldest were wearing loose-fitting dark-colored trousers with colored piping down each leg and at the bottom. Yes, Anna admitted, confused at his meaning. The older girl wore loose skirts with a similar strip of cloth around the bottom edge, Pedro continued. Yes, said Anna, even more confused. A memory was nagging at her, but she could not quite grasp it. These boys and girls both wore loose blouses and brightly colored waist sashes, right? Pedro smiled. Roma! Anna exclaimed. The memories of the traveling caravans that occasionally visited her grandparents' estate outside Madrid came back. Wandering performers famous for their romantic ballads, poetry, and wild dancing. Also famous for stealing anything they could get their hands on, so the wealthy patrons that hired them paid them very well to ensure their property remained unmolested. How did they get to this country so quickly? Anna asked. I do not know, Pedro admitted. But they are here, and it does not appear that they have changed their ways as a result. The angle of Traders Road was noticeable by the angle of the buildings in comparison to the cobblestone streets. Anna watched them pass like a row of old men sitting shoulder to shoulder on an uneven bench. If the man on the low end were to fall asleep, he would tumble the entire group to the ground. A break in the string of buildings showed them the harbor to the right and the lighthouse's massive column of steam spreading above the bay. Then they were back among the buildings. A squad of the watch passed along, people giving them a wide berth before returning to their chores. What colors are those? Anna asked. Pedro turned to look. I'm not sure of the house. From the amount of scarlet, I suspect Sir Henry Winslow's house has the governorship this year. The coach made the turn to Thieves' Market. In place of the first inland row house yawned an archway above a short stair. The fangs of an iron portcullis dangled above the heads of the ragged souls that wandered in and out of the foreboding maw. The abyss, Pedro said dramatically, leaning over to Anna's side of the coach to peer at the gate. People live in that cavern? Anna asked. A man in the simple clothing of a sailor sat on the middle step watching them. Anna took in the lank red hair blowing loose over his shoulders and the hard level gaze that belonged to the face much older. She lost sight of him as the coach completed the turn and her attention returned to what Pedro had been saying. Live, work, breed, and die, responded Pedro. You really should have read Father's book. Anna sighed. I tried, but every time I picked it up, my stomach made me put it down again. I found it fascinating, Pedro said. The conquest of the city and the establishment of the rotating governorship. He sounded like a small boy retelling thrilling tales of El Cid or the Arabian Nights. Our grandfather helped create this place, and our family name will be part of its history, he boasted. Oh, stop, said Anna, suddenly bored of the subject. This looks like every city in Europe and smells like every city in Europe. You speak as if Rome itself had been reincarnated. Riotous music suddenly intruded on their argument, drawing Anna's attention to the coach window as the vehicle slowed to a stop at the edge of a crowd blocking the road. Make way! Shouted the coachman. Make way! Anna and Pedro leaned out of the windows to see what the commotion was. A juggler in motley was performing a fountain with oranges in front of the horse's nose, causing the mare to suddenly back a couple of steps. Oh, steady there, commanded the coachman as he applied to the foot brake. Get away from me, horse, or you'll feel my lash for your mischief, he threatened. The jester just grinned broadly, caught his oranges, and stepped lightly aside with a deep bow, extending his arm as if to show the way. The coachman slapped his reins before recalling the foot brake. His foot never reached the lever. A bolt crashed through his breast before exiting his back and burying its head in the coach box. A startled corpse sagged sideways and fell to the cobbles before Anna's shocked eyes. The music swelled. The dancing and singing became riotous as the crowd flowed around at the sides of the coach. Pedro, realizing the danger, grabbed the door handle, but it was ripped away from his grasping hand. A mustachioed face entered, followed by broad shoulders. Pedro's boot made a bloody ruin of the man's large nose. Hands reaching through the windows grabbed Pedro's cloak, dragging him back and preventing him from finishing the intruder. Hands clawed at Anna's sleeves from her side of the coach. She jerked her arm away and batted at the offending paws with her Chinese fan to no effect. The door on her side opened and a thin man scrambled inside. Anna struck out with her fan, but the man easily grabbed her right hand. He leered at her as she snatched at the silky tassel at the base of the fan with her left. A quick tug, and a finger length of bright steel slid out of the fan's outer stave. Pulling against the man's grip on her right wrist, Anna's left hand drove the tiny dagger into the man's throat. Blood stained her white gloves, and she stabbed again and again. "We must flee!" Pedro's dagger slashed away his cloak before the man with the ruined nose could clear his head, and a thrust through the eye ended that problem. More arms were coming through the door, and Pedro made ready to take them on when Anna screamed behind him. Anna had forced her gurgling victim back into the opposite seat. As she tried to back away, her feet caught in the hem of her dress, and she toppled backward, the edge of her former seat catching her across the shoulder blades, snapping her head back painfully. Hands latched onto her ankles like a vice and started pulling her toward the door. She lashed out with her free foot, stomping down on the wrist that held her as she was dragged screaming through the coach door. Pedro turned and saw Anna's head disappear below the bottom of the door. With no thought, he clamped his dagger in his teeth, stepped across the coach and grabbed at the doorframe, launched himself, feet first, into the scrambling bodies attacking his sister. The impact scattered the group. Pedro rolled to his feet, snatching the dagger from his teeth as he charged into the fray. By the will of Providence, Anna's head missed the coach's iron step as she slammed into the cobbles. The tightly braided hair wrapped around the crown of her head saved the rest. She lashed out with her thumb dagger, striking the nearest arm, but the tiny blade merely ripped the man's sleeve from the elbow to wrist. Instead of bloody ruin, chainmail links shone back at her through her slashed fabric. Then the man was gone. Anna rolled to her right where her brother's mad leap had bowled over the mob. She staggered her way back to her feet as Pedro's maniacal attack drove the crowd of scowling faces back toward the front of the coach. Anna backed away from the melee until a hand grasped her left wrist, immobilizing the knife hand. Another clamped over her mouth, pulling her against the person standing behind her. "We must run. Now!" came a harsh whisper. Anna tried to fight, but she was held too strong. She tried to shout for Pedro, and her voice never made it to her own ears in the cacophony of the brawl. She saw Pedro standing at bay, facing a small, elegantly dressed man holding a rapier. The same rapier Pedro had left in the coach. The sword tip licked at his belly, and Pedro tried to turn it with a dagger. It was a feint. The point dove like a falcon, entering the top of Pedro's boot at the ankle. Pedro's face went chalky. He tried to slash the swordsman's arm with the dagger. The dandy calmly retreated a step. As Pedro's weight shifted onto the ruined ankle, screaming agony sent him to the ground. The hard hand twisted Anna away from the scene and propelled her blindly toward the rear of the coach. "No! I must help! Pedro!" The red-haired sailor ran past her, snatching her right hand in a hard grip. Rounding the coach wheel, they met two men rounding the other wheel. Anna's rescuer released her hand and dove hard at the larger of the two, slamming his shoulders into the big man's chest. The Roma accepted the impact, sliding back half a pace, enfolding the smaller man and pinning his arms at his sides. The second Roma grinned at Anna. "Come here, little girl," he said in a horribly accented Iberian. "We sell you back to your father." Anna held her ground. "You'll have to kill me," she declared, brandishing her thumb dagger. The man laughed and reached into the sash at his waist. A sudden flickering motion, and a large curved blade the length of Anna's forearm appeared in his hand, accompanied by the death rattle of a navaja. "Don't be a fool," the Roma said calmly as he began to circle it to her left. Anna turned to face him gradually, turning her back on the larger man still struggling with her erstwhile savior. She could see the Roma was closing the distance with each step. As her back turned forward to the big man, Anna lunged forward, flicking her fan open, trying to slap her assailant across the face. The man recoiled slightly as Anna thrust her tiny daggers in his throat. The man was an experienced fighter, and not fooled by the flared fan. He rolled his head around in distraction, and his left hand snatched Anna's left wrist, stopping the blade short of its target. Years of practice created muscle memory, and his right hand was in motion before he realized it. The Navaja's razor edge crashed into Anna's side in a vicious, disemboweling stroke that sent the slender girl flying away in a crash to the cobblestones. As Anna lay holding her side and gasping her last breath, one young hand washed the other. The big man felt the kid squirming and tightened his grip. "Hold still, you little shit!" The hands separated, and the right held a crude knife shaped like a flat bar of steel with the end broken off at the angle to form a point. The knife reversed in his hand, and the youth drove the point backwards past the hip and into the groin of the big man. The initial strike failed to produce a reaction, but when the handle was yanked upward, the reaction was an immediate shriek, and the arms flew away, dropping the young sailor on his feet as the big man collapsed in the street, kneeing a high note. Commotion on the right turned to the Roma now stooping over Anna. He saw the sailor rushing at him with a raised knife. The Roma stepped into the rush with a backhand slash aimed at the young man's belly. The youth's reversed knife dropped, hooking the Roma's wrist and stopping the cut. A thumb tip protruding above the top of the sailor's clenched fist burst the Roma's eyeballs, spraying the liquid within across the face. Screaming in agony, the man tried to abandon the fight and tripped over Anna's prostrate form, falling face first onto the cobble. Anna felt herself yanked from the ground, slung over a hard, bony shoulder, and came back to herself as hard-pounding feet drove daggers of agony into her side. "Put me down!" she gasped. "Shut up!" huffed the person carrying her. Looking down, Anna recognized the clothes and the streaming banner of red hair as those belonged to the young sailor. "Where's Pedro?" Looking back, she saw the mob of her abductors boiling around the coach, but no sign of Pedro. Suddenly, they were between buildings in the alley. "Where's my brother?" she demanded. The sailor was running too hard to answer. The fastest Roma had just entered the alley when a hard left and a reeking splash landed them in the open sewer that ran behind the buildings. The youth's boots skidded on the slime, and he found his footing and continued huffing along. "Where are we going?" Anna demanded. The only answer that she received was a sliding stop and the air huffing from her lungs as the sailor put her body down on the ledge next to the sewer channel before jumping up himself and pushing past her to open the door of the building. Anna hesitated until her rescuer leaned back out the door to drag her inside by her elbows. "This way! Hurry!" he said before slamming and barring the door and rushing her through the large kitchen past startled cooks and scullery maids. Anna was dragged through a raggedly draped doorway and into the common room of a tavern. "Oh, he's got a fancy one," cackled a woman's voice from a dime corner to one side. As Anna turned to look for the speaker, a Bosso-Saxon accent called, "Hey, boy, I'll give you a silver for even trade." Anna's rescuer dragged her through the great room, and she found herself in front of a handsome middle-aged woman with graying red hair, dressed in a high-waisted brown kirtle and wide leather belt. "Nancy, we need a flop with a door." The sailor offered the woman some coins. The woman looked Anna up and down and spoke in what Anna assumed was some form of Britannic. "Stole you a fancy, did you? A door for that one'll cost extra. Everyone here's had an eye. Here." The youth passed the woman silver coins. "And something for everyone," he added in a louder voice, making a show of passing 3 more silver coins to the mistress of the house. "Very well. Take the attic and be soft," the woman said, waving them toward the stairs leading to the upper stories. Again, Anna felt herself swept along as she was pulled through the room while a low tenor began to sing. "I know of a tavern not far from here, where you can get some mighty fine beer." By the time they reached the bottom of the stairs, the entire room had joined in. "The company's true, and the wenches are pretty. It's the greatest damn place in the whole city." At the top of the stairs, the sailor paused next to a large board on the wall with keys on the hooks. With barely time to consider, he lifted a key off the board. Anna had the time to see the number 7 above the now empty hook. Down the narrow hall and around the corner, she saw numbered doors. Her rescuer stopped at number 7 and locked the door from outside as a loud violence erupted in the common room below. Nancy was shouting, "There's nobody here, now sod off!" clattering dishes and scattering pewter, ratcheting navajas and a scream of pain, feet pounding up the stairs. Anna was pulled down the hall to room 7, and the door closed softly behind them. Shouts on the hall in a language she did not recognize, and the sounds of shoulders slamming into the doors that could not resist for long. Afternoon sun flooded the room as the shutters were thrown open, and Anna shielded her eyes. "Come on," the sailor whispered as he straddled the windowsill with his hand extended to her. "Hurry!" Door number 7 gave way to the splintering crash as the sound of bodies falling to the floor as its sudden collapse. The angry yells and sounds of the other doors being forced open convinced her that the window was a good idea. Taking the offered hand, she allowed herself to be hurried across the sill and stood with her heel wobbling on the roof slates as the shutters were hurriedly closed. Again, the hand was offered. "This way, señorita." They sidled along the tavern roof until they reached the edge. "We have to jump across," said the sailor. Anna looked at the gap and stepped back. "It is too far." "Would you rather stay here and wait for your friends?" He shot back. Anna took a deep breath and nodded. 3 quick steps taken together, and a rush of air before the neighboring roof rose up and drove the air from her lungs with her impact. She would never know if her foot slipped or if a slate gave way as she pitched forward, and her face slammed the hard slates of the roof.